Hi, welcome to Long Distance Review. I'm doing this one at night. I don't think the lighting's very good, so I do apologise. I'm going to try and mess around with it in the edit anyway, try and get it a little bit better. But anyway, this is my new review video for the new album by Thrice. By the way, I always seem to be wearing Architects t-shirts every time I do this these reviews. It's not a bad thing. I love Architects, but I do like other bands as well. Anyway, yeah, this is an episode where I'm going to look at the new Thrice album. Now, if you look back at Thrice were formed in 1998, and they've always had a stable lineup, which is admirable, if nothing else, for a band 20 years into their career. Their lineup consists of Dustin Kensrue on vocals and rhythm guitar, Tepai Taranashi on lead guitar, Eddie Breckenridge on bass guitar, and Riley Breckenridge on drums. I do apologise if I got any of the names wrong there, because I'm not very good at pronouncing Japanese names, let's say. So anyway, like I say, this is their 10th album in a 20-year career. If we look back, they had their debut album out in 2000, which was called Identity Crisis. They followed that up in 2002 with The Illusion of Safety. And then The Artist in the Ambulance came out in 2003. The much critically acclaimed Visu came out in 2005. The Alchemy Project then started in 2007 with the Alchemy Index Volumes 1 and 2, followed up in 2008 with the Alchemy Index Volumes 3 and 4. They then released Beggars in 2009 and Major Minor in 2011. The band went on a hiatus then in 2011. They never really split up. It was a hiatus. They still gigged. They still did a few shows here and there and everywhere. But they didn't get back together to do any recording until 2016, when they released To Be Everywhere Is To Be Nowhere. If we look at the sound of Thrice, it's a very hard band to pigeonhole to a label, let's say. I mean, sometimes bands are easy to pigeonhole down to this is a punk band, this is a rock band. Thrice, I guess their early sound can be sort of nailed down to more post-hardcore, more experimental. They had a lot of different time signatures in their early stuff, especially on the first 3 albums, and a lot of distorted guitars. And much more of a post-hardcore feel to the band, I think. It wasn't really until Visu came out in 2005 when they really found their more experimental sound. They added keyboards, they added synths, and then they layered the sound a little bit better, I felt. The Alchemy Project was always interesting because the 2 albums encompassed what was essentially 4 EPs, which were meant to showcase the Thrice sound with 4 different sounds. So that was an interesting project. And then Beggars and Major Minor, which came out in 2009, 2011 respectively, probably had a bit more of a grunge rock influence, let's say. It wasn't really a rock album. They've always been slightly, let's say, stylistically better than just rock. But that was more of a grunge influence on those albums. And let's say their comeback album, sorry if there was a bit of a gap there, the edit went a bit wrong. Let's say the comeback album, 2016, To Be Everywhere Is To Be Nowhere, wasn't really a comeback album. It was more of just a get back together after a break album. It was much more of an alt rock, less experimental, let's say, but it was still, there was a lot of technicality throughout the album, but it was more of an alt rock influenced album, I felt. Still very good nonetheless. And that's one thing about Thrice's career. They've always been critically acclaimed. Everything they've ever been released, they've always had critical acclaim throughout it. There hasn't really been a blot on their discography at all, which is interesting, which brings us on to Palms. Is it going to be a blot on their discography? Ooh. It's not, by the way. So this is Palms in 2018. Now Palms opens up with a synthesized song, let's say synthesized opening, a song called Only Us, which people might have heard before the album came out. Anyway, a much more atmospheric and haunting feel to this song than anything before, really, as an opening track. It's more of it's not really a punch in the face track, let's say, for an opening track. It's more of a pull at the heartstrings, but it's done so beautifully, it's so stirring and atmospheric that, and it builds. It really builds to a more aggressive sort of last third of the song with a big guitar and more aggressive vocals, and then sort of peters out and collapses in on itself almost. to finish on a more synthesised end, like it started with. I think it's a beautiful opening song. Really good track, really good Thrice song, and a real interesting opener for the album. It's followed up by the single The Grey, which most people will have heard in the videos out there on YouTube. The Grey is a much more punk influenced track, let's say. Much more post-hardcore style guitars on it, especially on the verse. But something the Thrice have always managed to do throughout their career is big choruses. And again, here we go, big chorus on The Grey. And The Grey is a brilliant track, and they just can't help themselves, Thrice. They've got melodies in them, they've got choruses in them. And these songs have got choruses, big choruses written all over them. And The Grey's no different. The Grey's a great song. The Dark follows it up, which is and it goes sort of harks back to the more atmospheric and haunting feel that Thrice were going for on the first song, but with real rhythmical drumming. It's got a real cool groove to it that I really like. Things will pick up the pace a little bit with the song Just Breathe. But overall, I think this album seems a lot more downtrodden than previous albums, let's say. Not necessarily depressing, but certainly more downtrodden. But each song seems to invoke a feeling and an atmosphere like never before. Technically, Thrice have always been great musicians, and they're still showcased here. If you look at the drum fills that they do on Just Breathe and the guitar work that's on A Branch in the River, you can see that Thrice still have those punk influences and the hardcore influences. And stylistically, they still do that on each song, but there's a lot more feeling and emotion in these songs than I've felt in a long time from Thrice. So there's a centerpiece on the album, which is a piano-led song called Everything Belongs, which to me sums up the album, really. It seems to invoke all the feelings that this album tries to produce. It tries to convey. It's like a downbeat and more insular-looking song. And it's a really interesting track. And I think that's where Thrice are best on this album, when they stylistically and artistically try and do something a little bit different. Maybe Thrice fans will miss out on the older days of the post-hardcore Thrice or the punkier Thrice, but this to me is a lot more interesting. And my favourite song on the album is A Branch in the River, where it almost seems like they take a little bit from throughout their career and put it into the song. There's some post-hardcore guitar work on there. As I said before, the guitar work on that song is great, but a lot of emotion on that song. Really emotional song, and that's my favourite on the album. Hold Up the Light sort of picks up the pace near the end, but it's a more traditional, just, let's say, run-of-the-mill rock song. Nothing's ever run-of-the-mill with Thrice, really, but it's more of a straight-up rocker than anything else. And Thrice finished the album off with the last two songs. Sorry, my camera cut out there for no reason. So, just to finish off, I feel this album is probably the most morose album they've ever done. But artistically and stylistically, I think this is much more interesting than anything they've done in a long time. Although it might not have the punch that some of their other stuff does, this is always interesting. It's never less than interesting, this album. And I think that it's great just to have Thrice back these days doing things like this, and especially doing this album. This is a really, really interesting album. This might not be your favourite Thrice album of their career at all, but this is never anything less than interesting. I love this album. I think it's really, really good. I think it's great to hear Thrice doing things like this in 20 years down the line into a career. It's brilliant. Go check it out anyway. The videos for The Grey are on YouTube, and Only Us, not Only You. Yeah, go check them out. I think they're really, really good. Anyway, check out, put your comments below. What do you think of the Thrice album? My next album I'm going to do, one of my favourite bands is releasing their new album on Friday, a band called Therapy. And I love that band. I'm not going to be around this weekend, but I will get a review of that album out at some point in time. But until then, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy listening to Thrice. I think it's a really good album. Check it out. Thanks very much. Bye.